ACI APIC Web User Interface. Okay, so now that we have the ACI APIC up and running and we are able to connect into the web user interface, I guess it's time to become familiar with it. Let's start by discussing the System tab. On the System tab, we can find basic status information on how our fabric is operating. So you're going to see a health score. The health score is dictated by, number one, how the configurations are implemented on the fabric, meaning that if you have something misconfigured, the health score is going to be affected. Same way as if you have an interface that should be active and it's not, health score is going to be impacted. If there is a performance issue or there is a hardware issue, health score is going to be impacted. A good health score not necessarily means that you're going to be 90% and everything should be working. It might not even be working because you have a misconfiguration somewhere. But overall, the fabric is in a healthy state. But in order for you to be in operation, you maybe have to be 98% or more. But it's basically a way for you to identify, okay, there's something going on. And the good thing about the GUI is that the APIC provides you visibility on what is causing this score to go down and find the information from my system health. And this is actually my general system health score, which means that it's the calculation from all my tenants, my physical devices, my fabric status, etc. So this will be a general health score. So let's say, for example, we see Leaf 101 here, and Leaf 101 has a health score of 90. So let's find out why it does have a health score of 90. So let's click on it. So once we get into the Leaf window or the Leaf status window, the dashboard, we can see there's a 90% health score. And you can either click the health score or click the health tab. And from there, we should see why our health score is getting affected. So in this case, our system, it begins with the system. So once we can identify on the system, there's going to be a particular indicator of where the health score is being affected. And we can see already that we have some alerts, in this case, some faults regarding operational status. So let's say, for example, if we see this particular log message, it means that we might be having an issue in this particular. So if we double click that fault, we can actually see a detailed description of what's going on. Sometimes the descriptions, I have to be honest, they're very, very complex to even understand. And I'm like, well, yeah, TCA ingress drop packets rate. Yeah, what is that? But then you have to do your own investigation and see what is that. Most of the time, I would strongly recommend to pay attention to those ones, and most important, the critical ones. So when it's a major fault, you definitely have to take care of that. So in this case, we see that there's a fault for the infra, and we're going to go to each domain so you can understand what each one is. Those are default domains in the ACI fabric. So the infra domain refers to all the physical aspects of the fabric. So in this case, either the line card on a chassis-based switch, we're talking about power supplies. Like in this case, it's actually telling us, hey, power supply is not correctly detected. So if we double click, it should tell us that on Leaf 101, we have a power supply that is not in operation, or there's no power supply detected, meaning that the switch on the back, there's one power supply missing. So let's go ahead and look back and take a look at that health score. And we're going to go in detail. So right now it has updated the health score for my pod 1 because Spine 201 seems to have a big issue. Okay. So again, let's go on to Leaf 101. Let's go on to health. And if you see there's an issue in particular with 101. So if we trace and we can see the color of something that is affecting, you can see the total count of major faults is 2. One of the faults is this one right here, and the other one is right here. And then this alert is telling us equipment policy. And sure enough, this is regarding that same power supply that is not being detected. So that is a very high level way to understand the system health. And by the way, in the dashboard, you also have a type of fault. So this will be the critical side, major, and then minor, and then just warning or informational. Okay, so you can see this information in detail. Below here, you should see all your connected APICs and their operational state. In this case, we only have a single APIC, so the operational state is, it's available because it's the only one that we're currently logged into. But if we had all 3 APICs to be compliant with an ACI fabric, and mostly for Cisco support, you need to have 3. So we should see 3 over there. Okay, so let's continue. Let me go ahead. So you can see the controllers. The controllers are basically our APICs. So if we have 3 APICs, we should see all 3 here, and then we can work on individual settings and policies. So there's a lot of details regarding each one, but basically this video is for you to understand and not be lost when you start working with the web user interface. System settings. This is global system settings, and we're going to be working a lot with this one. So don't worry, I'm going to discuss route reflectors because this will affect the spine layer, and this is how BGP re-advertises everything onto the fabric by reflecting those routes via the spines. Don't worry, we're going to discuss that as well. COOP, and we talked about the Council of Oracle Protocol. This is settings regarding the Council of Oracle Protocol. And then obviously we got the fault, and this is the global faults. This is meaning that every single fault in the fabric is going to be shown in this main fault set. Configuration zones. If we want to grab a particular configuration from one side to the other, we can then work on that, manage those configs, etc. And again, there's a whole video that we're going to discuss the configurations in detail, which also allows us to export the configurations in JSON, build a Python script, and automate. So this is one of the items that I love about ACI is the way that you can automate it, and you can literally build hundreds of tenants in a matter of seconds. And as long as you have a proper built script, you should have no issues taking advantage of automation. But in this case, let's continue here. Events, basically just telling us, hey, this happened, a link went up, went down, etc. Audit, what has been done, any changes by any user will be shown here. So you're going to see admin and what the admin has done, okay? Okay, so let's continue. Tenants. Oh, we're going to be working a lot on tenants. And this is basically one of the main sections that you're probably going to be working the most in ACI is the tenant. From there, you can build tenants and you can see current tenant. Each tenant will also have a health score. So if for some reason your configurations are not correct, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to see a lower health score. So you might want to check what's going on. We have 3 tenants, and we're going to go in detail. I mentioned the infrastructure tenant, which basically works with all the physical aspects of the ACI fabric. We also have the management tenant, which controlling my out-of-band management interface. And this is how we connect into the ACI APIC. There is a management tenant that is taking care of all that communication. And then the common tenant, we're also going to be working a lot with the common tenant. So the common tenant, in a nutshell, is a tenant that you can use to apply policies globally, or then you can also import or attach common objects into any other tenant. Let me rephrase. If you build a tenant, let's say you build tenant 1, and you build an object inside tenant 1, and you have another tenant called tenant 2, and you want to use an object that you build on tenant 1, you cannot go ahead and just import or take that object from tenant 1 and use it on tenant 2. You cannot. However, any object that is created in the common tenant can be shared with all tenants. Don't worry, and we're going to see a live demo. We're going to configure, we're going to do some pings, and you're going to see data plane in action. You're going to see how everything behaves once you build those policies. Okay, let's go to Fabric. In Fabric, this is where all the physical, I would call the Fabric section where we modify, we enable interfaces, we allow the tenant to communicate with the physical environment. So it's basically allowing my virtualization portion or my tenant portion, where we create those virtual networks, those tenants, communicate with the physical aspect of the fabric. So from here, we already saw on our first video, how do we commission the devices as they are discovered by the APIC. In Fabric policies, this is where we apply policies and we make changes to the default behavior of the ACI fabric. So we have policies. Let me show you, for example, policies. This is the global policy that is applied on the pod. So in this case, we are on pod 1. So if we make changes here, it's applied globally. So let's go on to policies. And then, for example, let's take this one. So let's say we want to change our global NTP server where all my leaves and spines and all my devices in ACI will use a default NTP server to update its clock. But if we want to assign a different NTP server that we can then apply to the pod, then we can say, no, I want you to use this particular NTP server. This is where you do it. And it's actually applied globally to all my ACI devices. Okay, so this is how we modify global items in the ACI fabric, as well as individual items or interface behaviors and interface characteristics, etc. So from here, don't worry, we're going to work on this. We're going to make some objects. We're going to see the behavior live on a real ACI fabric. Access policies. Oh, and this one you're going to be working, and trust me, when I first started working with ACI, I took a hard effort to understand how this fits all together. Because if you come from the traditional networking mentality, you start relating how you configure stuff on the, on the traditional way, and then you try to start connecting it in the way that ACI is configured or it's actually enabled, and it's completely different from the traditional side. So this part is going to take a little bit of effort for us to understand, but on this video, I am going to do it in a way that you're going to take it in no time. But please, I ask you for a favor, try not to relate this to traditional campus or traditional switching and routing configurations where we just go into an interface and we type Swift port trunk. Yeah, please don't try that. Let's make this a completely different approach. Let's think of this as a new approach to configure interface. And this is how we configure switches. This is how we configure interfaces. This is how we present VLANs. This is how we tell the fabric how to connect. This is the section where we actually interface the virtual to the physical, right? So anything that is virtual is going to be interfaced to the physical by the access policies. And don't worry, we're going to go through that. And basically, it's done over the AEP, or Attachable Access Entity Profiles. We're going to discuss all that in a much more detail. VM networking. Oh, this is another one that you definitely are going to be working with a lot. And this is basically VMM integration with VMware, or you can do Microsoft or Hyper-V integration with Microsoft. And basically what it's going to do, the APIC, is going to automate some configuration or object push or settings onto your vCenter environment. For example, if you have a vCenter environment, you can bind the APIC to the vCenter environment by doing VMM integration. And what that's going to do, if you build a tenant, you add an application profile and you build an endpoint group, and don't worry, we're going to go through that. You attach the VMM environment or the VMM integration to it, and you attach that VMM domain. If your vCenter environment supports virtual distributed switches, you're going to see on the fly, as soon as you apply that virtual domain onto your EPG, you're going to see on the fly a VDS being created in vCenter. And don't worry, we're going to see that live. It's amazing. So literally, all you have to do in vCenter is go, find your VM, and attach that VDS on the NIC, and your VM is going to be running on that particular tenant. So it's very, very cool, okay? Layer 4, Layer 7 services. This is where we import external appliances that come with a software-defined connector. In this case, let's say you're working with Fortinet or you're working with Palo Alto. Those are very, very common or very known firewall brands. And you need to make ACI work with that Palo Alto integration. You usually look for that connector and import that package in ACI, so then you can leverage the vendor package and interface with the ACI APIC, so then you can push policies and make both environments interact each other. And yes, we have a video dedicated to how we can interface a firewall to ACI and reroute traffic via the firewall and then make the traffic come back into ACI, which is very cool. Okay? Administration, well, it sets it all. This is where you set up your AAA, you do AD integration, LDAP, radius. This is where you configure most of your management settings, your local users, etc. And from there, we're also going to have scheduled tasks. So let's say you need to run some tasks in a scheduled fashion. This is where we configure that. Record policy, so stuff that you need to archive or you need to do log retention. This is where it's going to be implied. Firmware, this is where we update our device firmwares. So we're going to take a look at that. This is basically what we do to update our device firmware, which, by the way, it's all done with groups. So you group ACI devices into individual object groups, and then you apply the firmware to the group, and all the devices inside the group are going to get updated. External data collectors, we want to send this information to an external log source. In this case, you have a syslog server, you have an SNMP like SolarWinds or any other monitoring platform, then you integrate ACI via this particular section. Config rollbacks, another item that you're also going to be working a lot with. It's where we want to do a backup before we want to make a change. So in case we need to roll back, we just select the file, right click and install, and boom, we're back in rollback mode. Import export. This is how we can grab a configuration file that we exported from another ACI APIC and import into this one. Operations, this one, it's kind of cool. You can do some sort of troubleshooting. You can say, well, I'm trying to get from this IP to this IP, and it will show you a graph of what a potential issue might be. And it might tell you, yeah, you have a configuration issue, it's blocking this. So it's kind of cool. This is basically what it's the leaf current capacity based on how many objects you have configured and what's left, what up to what amount of endpoints you can configure, bridge domains, etc. So you're definitely going to have a limit based on your platform. And this is where it's going to tell you, oh, okay, you're about to run out of bridge domains. You cannot make more than 3,000 tenants, etc. And this is basically to optimize configurations, and meaning that if you want to do some proactive best practice and you want to verify what is configured on the tenant side or on the APIC as a whole, then we're going to work this in a more detailed section. Endpoint tracker, meaning that you want to find an IP where it's learned and all that. This is the place you want to say you want to do it. And basically you input that user IP or the computer IP, you put it there, click search, and boom, you're going to see which endpoint group it's attached to, where it's the node that is learning from it. So it's going to tell you from which leaf I just learned about that IP, and the actual interface. That's like us in the old school or traditional way or the legacy way. Sounds kind of scary, huh? Like telling what we know about networking as a legacy. But people, this is changing. It's changing very fast. So it's very important to keep up to date, because what we used to do in networking is going to become irrelevant. And I think it's already becoming irrelevant. So you have to make sure that you're always improving yourself and learning each day. Apps, and this basically shows us the app status as well as fault. And again, let's go onto detail on those settings. This video is for you to get to know and start knowing your way around the ACI APIC. Okay, alrighty. So this is the end of section 2. And section 3, we're going to go into the good stuff. We're going to start configuring objects. We're going to start applying objects, and we're going to master ACI in no time. Okay. Okay, everyone, in our next video, we're going to start with section 3, enabling connectivity in ACI. Thank you for watching.